Good day to all. I will be the first to introduce myself. My name is Goranka Horjan. I'm CEO at the Ethnographic Museum in Zagreb, Croatia. And I'm an art historian with a PhD in museology. My focus is, of course, management and leadership in museums and to strategic planning. I have been working in museums for more than 30 years. I'm also active in international professional organizations, more than 25 years in ICOM. Currently, I'm chairing Intercom, the International Committee for Museum Management, and I'm also a member of Europa Nostra and ECOMAS. I would like to share the picture of my museum. You can see it, very nice building in the middle of the Zagreb, Art Nouveau building. The museum has been established 100 years ago, and a special attention was paid to collecting the items belonging to so-called material culture. Majority of our collections are textile. I would also like to share some photos from our exhibition. You can see an excellent exhibition currently staged in our museum about head coverings, which are great collections we have. And another about the collection that was given to the museum by one of the founders of the ethnography in Croatia. Of course, we have fantastic collections, we have fantastic space, but the crisis did its way, and our museums is empty of visitors. Erik, you can introduce yourself now.
Thank you, Goranka. A beautiful museum, a beautiful house, and beautiful collection.
Yeah.
Well, my name is Erik Söderblom. I'm sitting here in Helsinki, Finland, in the capital area of this country, of course. I'm from the start, I'm a musician, the classical training. Then I slipped over into opera directing and studied actually in Germany with a very well-known guy called August Everding in Munich. And then I studied drama directing in Finland, back home. And then, well, from that on, it has been a long run. I've been working in some municipal theaters. I founded a theater in Helsinki, the Q Theater, that is still there, one of the most artistically interesting theaters in this country. I founded a festival for Baltic theater, Baltic Circle, that is still there, also very strong still. I'm out of there since a long time. Maybe that's why they are so good, good at going. And then I've been professor for acting at the Theatre Academy in Finland and the vice rector for the same institution. Then I've been the artistic director and CEO of the Helsinki Festival, which is a kind of Edinburgh of the Scandinavian countries, a big national festival. Then I've been a curator for Tampere Theatre Festival. Then I've been much more things. I've been I now at the moment I'm the artistic director of Espoo City Theatre, and Espoo is not Helsinki; it's the neighbor city here, only 15 minutes away from where I'm now at my home, since the theatre is closed. And I will also show a picture from the theatre. I prefer to show actually only one from the inside, because the theatre is not at all as beautiful as the museum in Zagreb. It's a former printing house, so it's quite rough from the outside, but inside what you see is an auditorium that you can build in this big black box space the way we want. Actually, now it's a kind of amphitheater, but it can be in many different positions. This is where we do our the productions we either produce ourselves or co-produce with other institutions and theaters and groups in Finland and abroad. The other name for this theater, Espoo City Theatre, is the International Theatre of Finland, which comes from the fact that we run also as a part of our normal activities. We now run a line. It's a kind of ongoing festival. Annually, we invite some 10 to 15 performances from abroad to our other stage, which I didn't show now. It's also a black box, a bit smaller. So that's me. And now, okay, sorry, Goranka, I cannot hear you. I think you're
yes, our institutions are really fantastic, and we are really sorry that we found ourselves in this situation, that we were locked down and had to change the programs, had to change the way of work. What we have been discussing among professionals is this concept of systemic crisis. And somehow in our museum sector, we think that this crisis actually started long before the pandemics hit. And the fact that supports this opinion is that for decades, institutions have been facing the decrease in budgets, especially after the crisis of 2008. We really have noticed that the support was going down. And this created a kind of vulnerability of our institutions. And not only institutions, but also all the individuals working in the field. Sustainability was a buzzword for more than 2 decades in cultural sector, and we must ask ourselves what went wrong leading us to this situation. And we have not been prepared to this crisis. We have not been trained to build resilience, and the sector was not only unprepared, but it was constantly operating on the verge of financial stability. This is the problem that we see, and when the crisis hit, it was a heavy blow. In our case, besides pandemics, we also faced 2 devastating earthquakes in Zagreb and the neighboring area in March and December, which also somehow showed how our museums were not well maintained, premises were not prepared for such a disaster. And of course, we have trouble in moving our collections because our storages are also usually in our institutions, in attics and in cellars. All standards say that they shouldn't be there, but for years we have been struggling to build a joint museum storage in Zagreb in vain, and now we were forced to start searching for solutions, but of course in crisis everything is more difficult.
Okay, yeah, that seems like a multifaceted set of challenges that you face. Starting from, I think there are 5 aspects of this question. It's kind of current crisis, it's a possible future crisis, it's a local crisis, and it's a global crisis. And of course, what's interesting might be the solutions that we can deal with when we have gone back to something that we call normal. But to start with this current crisis, of course, we didn't have any earthquake, but we had the same corona, and as everybody, and it's a global thing, of course. I would say in my country there was such a new thing, nobody knew exactly how to deal with it. But what happened in Finland was that the authorities first closed the cultural scene, just because it was possible. There was not a legal ground for going into closing other parts of the society. And now it's clearly seen that it was a mistake, because first of all, the cultural scene, I think all around Europe, has kind of managed these restrictions quite well, in the sense of keeping up the mask thing and keeping up the distances and so forth, so forth. So now the cultural field has been more or less kind of locked down, the cultural field, for a year. And now only since 2 or 3 weeks, they have really been closing down the rest of the society, because of course, closing down the cultural scene didn't help, because no contaminations came from that scene. So we are in the middle of the worst phase of the Finnish part of this pandemic right now. But what's interesting is that this pandemic has, as I see it, both stopped everything, but it has also accelerated many things, both good and bad things. And one of the bad things that, and here I come back to what you said, Goranka, since it has now become clear in the society that you can close down the cultural sector more or less totally without any big uproar, any big protest. There have been some protests, but not at all that strong. So therefore, I'm afraid that we are also going towards an election now. And it seems that the so-called Real Finnish Party, Real Finns Party, which is a populist, you could say right-wing party, related to the same kind of parties around Europe this time, not a very, I would say, open-minded, cultural-minded party, that we might see in the upcoming years a series of just closing theaters, closing museums, closing orchestras around Finland, because the money is not there, and just because it's possible politically. So this is a kind of not very nice vision. But of course, the more important thing for me is to see clearly right now what happens, to be able to, in the upcoming years, to do the right things through the art that is our task to promote and to show and to take part in the political discussion and support people in their trying to get a good life through art. Of course, I'm very curious to hear what you think about how you're going to, what would be your ways, your strategy to deal with.
Yes, Erik, you are right that perhaps, but when we look, have a historical background and look back into history, we see that actually crises always open way to this populist parties and political influence, whether from right wing or left wing, no matter. But actually, it is really difficult to trace all the aspects that cause this. One is, of course, the safety, the feeling of safety and security, and how much people in general are willing to sacrifice their freedom for feeling safe, secure, and that somebody else is taking care of them. This transition of, how to say, power, in fact, that when you feel endangered, then it's perhaps easier for people to ask responsibility, action from the authority, and it always has a price, of course. What else is the problem? That whenever the crisis hit any country or global markets, the culture is first to have cut downs in budgets and decreasing budgets. So somehow I think that in these populist movements around, culture has been expelled from education and obligatory educational programs. So you are not giving it enough space in the curricula at schools. And this is the period when you are building the habits, cultural habits in younger people. Mm-hmm. And exactly. I think this is crucial. The other problem I can see also is like that the culture had gained more instrumental value instead of this intrinsic value it has itself, but has been, linked to cultural tourism, has been linked to cultural industries as a kind of a spice on the top that can probably add some value to the basic economy, to the basic industry. But this is also wrong because culture has the value in itself, and somehow this has been removed from the public discourse.
Yeah.
This is, I think, crucial. And I really don't like, I must say, those attempts that, the artists are given a small fee and they are, just to survive on the verge of doing nothing. I think this crisis should focus more on creative work and actually give people some space, virtual or in real space, that they perform and they continue with their creative work.
Yeah, yeah. I very much agree what you said about this, the role of art in society, and this has been a kind of disappointment for me. I mean, we are told in this country that we have a very good school system, but now we see that we don't have, in this sense, speaking of a modern society, modern state, and we know that we are now going through what Klaus Schwab called this, or was it Schwab? I know I can't remember the name, but the fourth industrial revolution, which is kind of a phase in this kind of development when not anymore hardware, but software is the driver in the society. And this means that the cultural art has a much bigger role in the dynamic of the modern welfare state that is taught. It's not anymore that the cherry on the top of the cake. It's actually the cake, and the well-being is the culture. That's the thing. And we clearly in this country have a generation of politicians now, even if they are young and even if they are female, leading the country, that don't understand this, the core of this statement and the core of this thing. And this has been really kind of a shock for me. I thought it was a bit different. So that the pandemic has brought this notion to the surface. But to come back also to what you said about this populism, this is for me what I can see in the global as a global crisis. I mean, what has happened during this year is that the state has taken a firmer control of the individuals all over the world. We have less so-called freedom than we had before. Freedom of speech, freedom of whatever. We cannot even touch each other. We need to keep distance. They are full of a set of kind of things that we are supposed to obey. And at the same time, we see that, for one thing, that China is the country who has managed this crisis the best, and that's not the country of personal freedom. It's an autocratic, totalitarian country with like an army. And I mean, it's quite clear that around the world, there will be new crises coming up, ecological and kind of whatever in the upcoming years. And there is the danger of on a global level that we are going towards diminished kind of personal freedom in the big scale. And we see this in Europe also. If I think of the kind of chain of countries south of Finland, like Poland, Czech, Hungary, Belarus, and so forth, even Turkey, we see autocratic leaders who have quite cynically, not to speak of Russia, of course, cynically used this crisis to increase their own personal power and wealth. And
yes,
this
but,
is really...
perhaps we also somehow see that some key concepts that European Union has been promoting for years are now endangered. You can see when the how to say pandemic starts, immediately this claustrophobic attitude appeared. Closing the borders, checking the others, not allowing the entrance, controlling quarantines. All these things are somehow having an impact on people's value systems. And this is crucial, and I think this is something we have to focus on. In other words, for example, let us see that in former EU programs, mobility was really something on the top of priorities. Mobility of cultural institutions, mobility of professionals, exchange, collaboration. Now nobody speaks about it. Simply gone. And we can all recall how much money has been spent in culture field on exchanges and how to say, supporting this mobility. Perhaps is now the time to see how to find solutions, how to perhaps contribute to virtual mobility for some time, to help the institutions and creative sector to equip themselves, equipment or investing in softwares and hardwares was a kind of a forbidden item in many budgets. And now we see that many institutions switched online without being properly equipped. For museums, this is really the case. We can see big players, big museums who have always been good at using new technologies. They have the special digital departments. They can invest money in tailored multimedia services, but they are a small percentage of museums. Majority can even not dream of such such investments. And for them, the pushing them online is a problem. It's the problem for the people. It's the problem that you cannot get income with your online programs, and you have to invest in them. And this is a serious trouble for us.
Exactly. I think this kind of polarizations of everything we see is one mega trend. The big ones get bigger, the small ones are really in trouble. That goes for countries, that goes for art institutions, that goes for people. I mean, with the economical system that we have, I mean, all states are now printing money to So there is more money around. But in a very short time, it has ended up with the 10 most richest people in the world. So the economic is somehow not working in a proper way. It's leaking upwards.
Yes, of course. And what you have just said is several sectors will accumulate the huge wealth, and with enabling smaller players to create and to give them how to say technological support, software support. This can also help many countries and many regions to participate in this production, and actually to more evenly distribute the income creating, supporting smaller SMEs that can then link themselves with the institutions. But unfortunately, we are not seeing any action in that direction.
Yeah. That when you go back to what we call normal, that's of course when things really start happening or not happening. So therefore, I mean, if we go into the kind of possibilities or solutions or whatever can be thought of in this situation, I think you're right in when you say that some things that we didn't know would be doable. For example, us having this kind of conversation would not have happened in the same way only 1 year ago. And there is also, from the point of view, ecological point of view, there's been a lot of senseless traveling. Now we can avoid senseless traveling and maybe focus on more important traveling. It's quite clear that we cannot, over the net, we cannot create any deep emotional bonds, a real understanding of other people, but we can, when we have it, we can extend it over the net, for example. We meet each other for the first time now, but I mean, if we would have met in real life at some point, it would be quite natural for us to continue over the net. Also, and this is accessibility, of course, and this is wisdom, not to pollute the air with these airplanes. But another thing is that this digitalization of the performing arts, which is a new thing. There was some documentations before and some, but not that much streaming. Now everybody streams. And I think this will stay also after the crisis, which of course is accessibility for people that cannot go to theater because they're old, they're sick, or they're inhibited somehow because it's expensive or because they live far away. So there are these kinds of new positive things. And also, I would say in the end, that for the first time in the history, there is a kind of global understanding of pain geographically far away. And that's, of course, because we have the same. We know we have the same here, or as in Uruguay or Paraguay or in wherever. So
yes, slide down somewhere in Central America. So it maybe brings the empathy into focus.
The empathy, yes,
that you know.
Exactly.
Somehow you can understand people better, and before probably it was just more programming, more putting activities on the show, events. Somehow you may be losing the real connection with the broader audience. And what you have said really, these online programs actually may bring in new users, new audiences who would otherwise not be attending shows, concerts, plays, museums, etc. So we have to also ask ourselves about the criteria, how we assess how good do we perform. For whom is it only the, how to say, high level performance which is criticized by our fellow colleagues, scholars, etc., the thing that matters, or we are really expecting the feedback from real people, from broader audiences?
Yeah. Yeah, that's how it is. And also this awareness of people around the world, people like we around the world. I think that's a big thing, and it will be needed when we will see these global Trumps, not only American Trumps, but global Trumps, and the counter force for that will be the global, let's say, normal people.
Yes.
So not only American normal people, but kind of
normal.
And this is of course, I mean, this is something that we also can support in our art. And this is for me very important to realize that I can, in my artistic and even let's say, in my artistic choices, they can be political in that sense. When I try to support people in their well-being, in their kind of attempt to have a good life, this awareness of the global situation, this awareness of the risk for these global things that might come or might not come, I can point at them and say,
yes,
come on.
Yes, this solution maybe is, for example, in museum world, we have been for some times talking about empowerment of people, empowerment of our audiences, engaging audiences. So all these concepts now can have a new meaning and actually serve as a motivation for us to rethink and restructure how we work and to set new priorities, to explore new scenarios for working in museums, but in other cultural institutions as well.
Right. It's the question of the relevance of art, relevance of culture. And if we now, when we become aware of certain things, certain mega trends, certain local trends, if that helps us making art, what we do, more relevant, to reach a situation where it cannot in the future be just erased like this, or locked down like this, or just cut the budgets like this, because it's supposed to be the cheapest, but actually it's not the cheapest. Then you touch something that the value of which is unmeasurable.
Yes, I have just saw some data about the willingness of people to go back to the institutions. For example, we have not been locked down for a long time. At the beginning last year, from late March to beginning of May, but also due to the earthquake, and then in late December, beginning of January this year because of another earthquake. But the visitors are not coming. We have 70% reduction. And I just read some data from the States, and also that the interviews were held with people, and they say that they don't feel, about 30%, that they don't feel secure to go soon into the museum, and about 50 of them somehow change the attitude of going out. This is really alarming.
Yeah, those numbers are not that drastic in Finland. on the contrary, there is no kind of documentation or many people just waiting to be able to come back, which is of course a nice thing.
Yes, I think we are not so obsessively afraid like some other people, but of course we have difficulties, for example, for keeping the distance. School groups cannot come to the museum. Not any groups, tourists are not there, and of course Croatia is a tourist destination. So all this variety of people who used to come and visit our museums are missing now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But somehow in my heart, I believe they will be back, because, I mean, in the end, art is there because it's needed. People need art.
Perhaps a new revival, you know, because we are then, of course, bombarded with online contents, and there will be a suffocation sooner or later. So whenever somebody mentions webinar or online survey or a kind of training, people simply sometimes freak out and say, "Oh no, not again!" Yes,
no,
but they want the real thing.
They want the real thing, and people need to meet other people, people need to have experiences through other people, with other people. We are, in the end, we are flock animals. And we get sick if we cannot touch anybody. We get sick if we are forced to be alone.
Also, maybe we can come to a conclusion now and say that this crisis really tests ourselves and our way of doing things in several ways. In how, not only how do we respond to the crisis, what we are willing to sacrifice to feel secure, but also perhaps to look back and see how what we could have done better in our planning, in how to say, developing the feeling for cultural sector and position it more well. And I really do hope that the lesson is learned now, and that we will have better solutions in future, and that the citizens, authorities and institutions, cultural workers will somehow find a common language and find solutions to put us back to new normal.
You said it, Goranka. Thank you.